Tennessee, should they be number one again? Brought to you in part by Newbrook Collision Center. For nearly 50 years, Newbrook Collision Center has been East Tennessee's best choice for quality repair work and fantastic customer service. Go to joenewbrookcollision.com. Caleb, should Tennessee be number one? The AP ranking will come out today, so hopefully people are watching this before it's dated. But you tell me, should they be number one again?
So luckily, this won't be too dated because the point I'm going to say up front is they won't be number one and the AP won't have them number one. So I'll just say it though. Tennessee should be number one.
So if I'm watching this today, I'm like, man, those Associated Press guys, if they have Tennessee number one, they really stuck it to Calhoun.
That means they watched the show. Yes. Tennessee should absolutely be number one. So Auburn now I get it. Tennessee's 20-4, Auburn's 21-2. Auburn just lost at home to Florida a week after Tennessee beat Florida by 20. On top of that, Florida beat Auburn at Auburn. They were number 6, so that Florida win looks like a much more quality win for Tennessee. Meanwhile, Duke lost to Clemson on the road. That's their first ACC loss. I think we can agree this is not your father's ACC. Okay, the SEC is this year's ACC in basketball, honestly. And so Tennessee will move. They should move ahead of Duke and Auburn. It's going to come down to Tennessee and Alabama. And Alabama was number 3 going into last week. Tennessee was number 4. Here's my issue with Alabama, and I'm serious on this. They haven't come close to playing Tennessee's schedule yet. You could say they beat Kentucky when Tennessee lost to Kentucky. I'll concede that. Alabama still hasn't played Auburn, and they still haven't played Florida. Tennessee has had to play Florida twice and had to play Auburn on the road. And they lost to Auburn by missing a last-second 3 on the road. On top of that, when Alabama played Vanderbilt, they played Vanderbilt at home, and how many times, and Dave and I, you and I both, we insist every time, there is no bigger difference on the margins in a game than Vanderbilt at home versus Vanderbilt on the road, right?
Correct.
I mean, so when you take those things into account, how brutal Tennessee's SEC schedule has been to this point, Tennessee has yet to play, just so you guys know this real quick, in basketball, Tennessee has yet to play an unranked team at home in the SEC. That's insane. Every team they played at home has been ranked. And every team they played on the road has either been ranked or had a winning record. Okay, they haven't gotten to play LSU or South Carolina yet, which are the 2 bottom teams in the SEC. They have been just in a brutal dogfight from the start. I think it's clear-cut when you look at Tennessee's resume versus Alabama's resume. Tennessee should be number 1. Honestly. Now, you can make the case for Auburn even after they lost, and I get that. I understand how you can make the case for Auburn after they lost, but I would venture to say that Tennessee putting a fight up against Auburn at Auburn should count for something on that matter, and the fact that Auburn just lost at home should count for something.
Adam says, I can't believe people think Auburn is better than Tennessee. They beat us barely, but even when we were undefeated, they said Auburn was better. Now, okay, let's play both sides of this. Auburn's big man was hurt, and he was beat up, and he was probably playing at about 70%. But I want to throw this out there for a moment, and it is on our poll question. So right now you have Auburn at number 1, who's 21. You have Duke. I'm sorry, this would be last week's ranking. So you have Auburn at number 1, Duke, Alabama, Tennessee, Houston. Now, if I would have told you those 4 teams 10 years ago, you would have said Duke's going to get it, right?
Yes, exactly.
Now, so the question I have for you, and I told you this would happen, and I thought it would happen by the SEC getting North Carolina and Duke. I'm sorry, guys. I love ACC basketball. Like, I went out of my way to watch North Carolina Duke, and it rarely ever disappointed, like maybe one time in 10. It was always like a one-possession game, was it not? I mean, it was the best rivalry in sports because it always paid off. Let's take a look at our poll question. So our poll question is this. And I know where it's going to go, but should Duke ACC teams get more credit? Yes, it's the basketball conference. Nope, times have changed. Right now, it's about 3/4. Nope, times have changed. Times have changed, guys. If you still believe that the ACC is the basketball conference, you have lost your mind. Because let me tell you what's going to happen. not only is the ACC lost some of its talent already to other teams, it's going to lose more. Kids grow up fans of Tennessee. How many of you out there are watching the show and you'd give anything to put on that uniform, not be like Thunder Thornton and pay $1 million, but you do anything to put on that uniform and run through the tee? That's the way guys like Hurley, Krzyzewski, all the Krzyzewski, Wojciechowski. That's what they thought about playing for Duke. That's what James Worthy and Michael Jordan thought about playing for North Carolina. Guys, that ain't going to be the case anymore, because you know what's better than the two blues I just mentioned? Green. So, and it'll have a bigger impact on basketball than it will football. Football, you've got to hit on what, 8 to 10 transfer guys that you pay for, or 8 to 10 high school guys that you pay for. You really only got to load up and pay for one. And I'm sorry, I've done both. Basketball evaluation is 10 times easier than football evaluation. Football evaluation, you got to test heart, you got to test the hip and knee bend. Guys, I'm telling you, not only is the ACC going to be the second best conference in the nation, it may be the third best conference in the nation when it comes to basketball. Don't rule out the Big Ten. Don't rule out the SEC. Man, I think the ACC is on its way to being the Big East of my generation.
It's very close, and I'm going to address that a little bit further in a few minutes, because just so you guys know, the reason the SEC is where it is, there's a few reasons, and it predates just them becoming a mega conference. As for Tennessee, I agree. I mean, it's to the point where the ACC is such a tier below. I think 4 or 5 SEC losses is worth more than 1 or 2 ACC losses. And I think that's why Tennessee's clear cut number 1. And well, I'm not clear cut. Okay. I actually think your strongest case is for Auburn, who just lost. But one of the things we talk about with these mega conferences, Dave, is it's not just being in the conference, it's who you've played within the conference to a point. Now, basketball's not football, because at least basketball, you have to play everybody in the conference. And football, I mean, I'm sorry, this is my issue with these mega conferences. You don't get to brag about the conference you're in football, because if you get an easy, like, I'm sorry, Dave, people are going to hate me for saying this. If teams do what I think they're going to do next year, I don't think the SEC, I don't think Tennessee is going to have a right to wave the SEC flag for their schedule strength next year if they're trying to jockey for a playoff spot, because you played a really easy version of the SEC schedule.
Oh, you're talking about next football? Year.
Yeah, in football.
Yeah. I thought it helped teams like Tennessee and other teams because they played such a weak schedule. And now the committee members change every year, every 2 years. So, they could be totally different. Somebody could come in and say, listen, I don't care if you're 7-5, you better play the hardest schedule ever. I don't think that's going to happen, but it could. I think they're always going to devalue schedule strength as we as analysts see it, because they want the biggest, best names up there, and the biggest, best names usually play the weakest schedule.
Yes, but see, it was so obvious to people like me that Texas wasn't a college football playoff team. They relied on being in the SEC and playing in the SEC title game to get there, but they had a horrible SEC schedule. The SEC was better than the Big Ten, but Texas had a much easier schedule than Ohio State. And you go the other way, Indiana lucked out on playing the 8 of the 9 worst teams in the Big Ten this year. So it's not about SEC versus Big Ten in football, it's about who you play. But in basketball, when I compare Tennessee to Alabama, by the end of the year, it'll be the same. But right now, we should be using the same type of criteria. Who has Tennessee played in the SEC, and who has Alabama played in the SEC? Alabama has not played Florida or Auburn yet. That's 2 of the top 6 teams and 2 of the top 4 in the SEC. Whereas Tennessee has played Florida twice. They had to play at Auburn. So that would explain why Alabama has 3 losses and Tennessee has 4. Now, again, you want to put Auburn at number 1 because they just have a second loss? Fine. But Duke's going to fall with a 3rd loss because, again, they're in the ACC. And like we just talked about, the ACC is a step behind the SEC. My contention is Tennessee should not be behind Alabama for number 1 this week. And it's a bad look that Alabama's ahead of them for having 1 less loss when Tennessee's played a much more brutal SEC schedule.
Can't argue with that. I cannot argue with that.